Welcome to this brief video on maximum teaching in the clinical setting. Maximizing the effectiveness of your teaching starts with preparation. That is, it's important to set conditions and expectations with your learner. We frequently assume too much regarding what learners know about what they should do and how we want things to go. The more explicitly you can communicate those things, the more effective the entire experience will be for both you and the learner. In addition to focusing on what you expect from the learner, consider sharing as explicitly as possible what the learner can expect from working with you. For example, what is your style of teaching? What will the typical day look like? Are there particular points in the day that are more unusual than others? What commitments do you make to your learners? And last, what about goals for the educational experience? This includes both formal goals from the medical school, but also personal goals the learner may have for this particular setting. How do those goals relate to the learner's previous experiences and self-assessed strengths and weaknesses? What concerns does the learner have at this initial point? Getting at these issues requires a conversation with the learner at the start of the educational time with you. This is a one-page graphic illustrating the 1-minute preceptor. It's available as a download, and there's also an available document that explains each of the steps. The 1-minute preceptor is an evidence-based model for structuring educational interactions to maximize precepting with learners. The 1-minute preceptor consists of several steps, and it's not that you have to be a slave to the format, but there are some specific components that are likely responsible for its effectiveness. First, start with securing a verbal commitment or judgment from the learner. This allows for a snapshot as to what the learner is thinking and prompts a high degree of learner engagement and investment in the interaction and how it will play out. Second, probe for the reasoning underlying the learner's judgment or decision. Third, the learner's answer may prompt a bit of teaching as to a specific topic. The advice here is to keep it focused and brief. Of course, this step may not apply to a particular instance. Fourth, reinforce what the learner did well, being as specific as possible. Think in terms of what you want to make sure doesn't disappear from the learner's repertoire. Fifth, if the learner performed some problematic behavior or exhibited some particular faulty bit of reasoning, explicitly correct it by noting what was problematic and why. And last, bring some closure to the interaction in the form of asking for self-reflection from the learner as to what was learned, what the learner plans to do differently next time, or what the learner might need to maximize the learning potential of this brief experience. Calling this model the 1-minute preceptor is likely inaccurate in that it may actually take a few minutes. Still, it's designed to maximize use of that time and provide a predictable structure for both the learner and the teacher. At the heart of the 1-minute preceptor are questions, and there are good reasons questions are a primary tool for effective teaching. First, a robust history of research in educational psychology has established that when learners have to generate an answer to a question, information presented to them immediately afterwards tends to be remembered. It appears that trying to answer a question stimulates paths of neurons that are then enlisted for encoding new information into memory. Of course, another benefit of questions is that it's the only way to try to peek inside the learner's head with regard to their knowledge and reasoning. And last, questions prompt learners to assess their own knowledge and reasoning, a valuable skill referred to as metacognition that's a prerequisite for developing as a lifelong learner. So we see that questions are central in effective clinical education. How can we ensure the most effective results? First, train yourself to ask open-ended questions that allow the learner to go in different directions, truly exposing whatever their thoughts might be. Because we frequently pose questions with the correct answer in mind, it's easy to slip into formulating questions in such a way that they are relatively narrow by providing answer choices or hinting at the answer in the actual question. Research shows that teachers tend to wait a minuscule amount of time before jumping in with a response. As awkward as it may feel at first, try not responding, even if it takes a few seconds for the learner to answer. Usually it is just a case of a few seconds, and how could it not be at least that long if what you're after is a thoughtful response? Even after receiving a response, resist the temptation to provide the answer or payoff of the question. Is there a way to squeeze a bit more cognitive effort out of the learner's experience, which will then deepen the learning? Many times there's a lot of potential juice that can be squeezed out of a specific educational experience, but we lose sight of those possibilities because we focus on the correct answer or accurate description that applies to the scenario at hand. Instead, what about asking how a specific change in the scenario would affect, say, the patient presentation, or the diagnosis, or the course of treatment? So the educational question might start with the lead-in, what if, or suppose that. And last, there is always the possibility of posing a question that prompts the learner to reflect on what they experienced. Such questions might include, so what did you learn today? Or what questions arose for you today? What surprised you? What do you wish you had done differently? Or what do you wish you had known beforehand? It's difficult to go wrong with a broad or open-ended question. A black belt move is to pose and answer some of those questions yourself. As you share your answers, you role model curiosity and lifelong learning. We tend to think of teaching as instruction or feedback, forgetting that learners are also observing their clinical teachers as role models. So the most effective teachers are conscious of that fact and intentionally demonstrate the kinds of behaviors and attitudes they want to impart to learners. If you demonstrate a passion for your work, the learner comes away with a very different lesson than if they observe a lack of enthusiasm or outright complaints. And of course, teachers easily lose credibility if learners judge them to be hypocritical, advising learners to do one thing but not following the same advice themselves. The other point about effective role modeling is to remember that learners can only observe your actions, so to benefit from what's going on inside your head, you have to be intentional in sharing what's going on in there. And ideally, that explicit communication occurs within a collaborative dialogue in which the learner can express their reactions and resulting questions. As we bring this video to a close, here's a recap of the topics we covered. The primary question is, what do you plan to do differently as a result of your investment in viewing this video? Reflecting on that question and generating some specific actionable response is a necessary first step toward improvement. Last, how will you remember to enact your intended changes? The answer has to be tailored to your unique situation, but forming it now helps ensure that your investment in this process pays dividends indefinitely. If you would like personalized assistance on this topic or anything related to your role as an educator, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.